Hi, and welcome back. Today, let's talk about Japanese literature. Japanese literature spans a period of almost 2 millennia and comprises one of the major literatures in the world, comparable to English literature in age and scope, including novels, poetry, and drama, travelogues, personal diaries, and collections of random thoughts and impressions. In recent years, Japanese literature has become a genre of its own among Western readers. When discussing their favorite styles of writing, they might list romance, science fiction, historical novels, or Japanese literature. Japanese literature itself naturally includes many genres of its own, and yet we so often bundle them under the tantalizing umbrella. So what is it in the modern literature of Japan that makes it so irresistible to international readers? Japan, like the UK and France, is a nation particularly known for its long and broad history of literature, prose, poetry, and theater. From what is widely considered to be the world's first novel, Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, written 1,000 years ago, to modern breakout political and feminist writers like Meiko Kawakami and Sayaka Murata, Japanese literature has thrived and been celebrated for centuries. The immediate draw of Japanese literature in the West is the same as that of Japanese art and cinema. That being the fact that European and Asian artists, be they writers, poets, painters, animators, or musicians, observe the world differently from one another and capture those observations differently in their art. For example, many European love stories from Shakespeare to Danish fairy tales end with a wedding. In Japanese literature, a love story may not have such a clearly defined beginning or end, but might instead be a snippet of someone's life or relationship. This is inspired by opposing views on narratives, time, and endings. This different approach to telling a love story or a family drama feels new and fresh to Western audiences. One popular thematic trend of modern Japanese literature is the Kafkaesque genre. While this style began with Bohemian writer Franz Kafka, it has been almost entirely co-opted by Japanese authors and also some modern Korean authors too. Haruki Murakami, Sayaka Murata, Hiroko Uyamada, and Yoko Ogawa have all tackled the Kafkaesque genre head-on. Inspired by the infamous salaryman culture of Tokyo and the rigid societal and familial structures of contemporary Japanese life. In Japan, much of the best modern literature is punk, a form of art that betrays anger at sexist, patriarchal, capitalist systems that have been taken for granted for far too long. Haruki Murakami is renowned for writing male protagonists going through some kind of displacement or existential crisis, expressed through urban fantasy and surrealist narratives. Meanwhile, Sayaka Murata has become increasingly bold in her aggressive attack on traditions, systems, and hierarchies. Now, let's talk about the short story of The Aged Mother by Matsuo Basho, under the lens of formalism approach. But before we go there, let's talk about what formalism is. In literary criticism, formalism refers to a style of inquiry that focuses almost exclusively on features of the literary text itself, to the exclusion of biographical, historical, or intellectual contexts. The name formalism derives from one of the central tenets of formalist thought, that the form of work of literature is inherently a part of its content, and that the attempt to separate the two is fallacious. By focusing on literary form and excluding superfluous context, formalists believed that it would be possible to trace the evolution and development of literary forms, and thus literature itself. In simple terms, formalists believe that the focus of literary studies should be the text itself, and not the author's life or social class. Art is produced according to certain sets of rules, and with its own internal logic. New forms of art represent a break with past forms and an introduction of new rules and logic. The goal of the critic is to examine this feature of art. In the case of literature, the object of reflection is the text's literariness, that which makes it a work of art and not a piece of journalism. This attention to details of literary text was an attempt on the part of literature to turn its discipline into science.
A poor farmer and his aged widowed mother. They owned a bit of land which supplied them with food, and they were humble, peaceful, and happy. Shinano was governed by a despotic leader who, though a warrior, had a great and cowardly shrinking from anything suggestive of failing health and strength. This caused him to send out a cruel proclamation. The entire province was given strict orders to immediately put to death all aged people. Those were the barbarous days, and the custom of abandoning old people to die was not uncommon. The poor farmer loved his aged mother with tender reverence, and the order filled his heart with sorrow. But no one ever thought a second time about obeying the mandate of the governor, so with many deep hopeless sighs, the youth prepared for what at the time was considered the kindest mode of death. Just at sundown, when this day's work was ended, he took a quantity of unwhitened rice, which is principal food for poor, cooked and dried it, and tying it in a square cloth, swung and bundled around his neck, along with a gourd filled with cool, sweet water. Then he lifted his helpless old mother to his back and started on his painful journey up the mountain. The road was long and steep. The narrow road was crossed and recrossed by many paths made by the hunters and the woodcutters. In some places they mingled in a confusing puzzle, but he gave no heed. One path or another, it mattered not. On he went, climbing blindly upward, ever upward towards the high bare summit of what is known as Ubatsuyama, the mountain of the abandoning of aged. The eyes of the old mother were not so dim, but that they noted the reckless hastening from one path to another, and her loving heart grew anxious. Her son did not know the mountain's many paths, and his return might be one danger. So she stretched forth her hand, and snapping the twigs from bushes as they passed, she quietly dropped a handful every few steps of the way, so that they climbed the narrow path. Behind them was dotted and frequent intervals with tiny piles of twigs. Weary and heart-sick, the youth gently released his burden and silently prepared a place of comfort as his last duty to the loved one. Gathering fallen pine needle, he made a soft cushion, and tenderly lifting his old mother therein, he wrapped her padded coat more closely about the stooping shoulders, and with tearful eyes and an aching heart, said farewell. The trembling mother's voice was full of unselfish love as she gave her last injunction. "Let not thine eyes be blinded, my son," she said. "The mountain road is full of dangers. Look carefully and follow the path which holds the piles of twigs. They will guide you to the familiar way farther down." The son's surprised eyes looked back over the path, then at the poor old shriveled hands all scratched and soiled by the work of love. His heart smote him, and bowing to the ground, he cried aloud, "O honorable mother, thy kindness trusts my heart. I will not leave thee. Together we will follow the path of twigs, and together we will die." Once more he shouldered his burden, how light it seemed now, and hastened down the path, through the shadows and the moonlight, to the little hut in the valley. Beneath the kitchen floor was a walled closet for food, which was covered and hidden from view. There the son hid his mother, supplying her with everything needful and continually watching and fearing. Time passed, and he was beginning to feel safe when again the governor sent forth heralds bearing an unreasonable order, seemingly as a boast of his power. His demand was that his subjects should present him with a rope of ashes. The entire province trembled with dread. The order must be obeyed, yet who in old Shinano could
In The
make a...
Aged Mother by Matsuo Basho, we have the theme power, selfishness, honesty, forgiveness, wisdom, love, and change. Narrated in the third person by an unnamed narrator, it becomes clear to the reader from the beginning of the story that Basho may be exploring the theme of power. The ruler of Shining abuses his power by requesting that those in the region kill their elderly parents. The ruler, who is a warrior, does not see any benefit when it comes to old people. It is only at the end of the story that he becomes aware of the benefits of keeping old people alive. If anything, the ruler is acting selfishly because inevitably, most people will eventually be old, but does not dawn on any of the people in Shining. That is still, the farmer realizes that he cannot kill his mother or allow for her to die. He risks his own life in order to save the life of his mother, something he knows will not please the ruler of Shining, and that is why he hides his mother in his home. Even though she knows that she is to be killed, the mother cannot but help her son because she loves him. She does this by leaving twigs in the path so that the farmer will find his way down the mountain. It is also interesting that when the farmer reaches the top of the mountain with his mother, he has a change of heart. This suggests to the reader that the farmer loves his mother more than he fears the ruler of Shining. He is not afraid to go against the ruler's wishes, even if it means certain death for himself and his mother. This may be significant as Basho may be suggesting that love will conquer all. That once a person is true to their family, they have the ability to not only survive difficulties, but to allow themselves to override the wishes of those who might be in power. There may also be some symbolism in the story which might be important. The mountain can be seen to represent or symbolize difficulties. The farmer struggles as he is climbing the mountain, and his mother, by way of the twigs, makes it easier on her son, even though she is set to die. The fact that the ruler is a warrior suggests that he is brave. However, this may not necessarily be the case. The ruler is speaking on the most vulnerable in society by making a decree that old people should be killed. There is nothing brave about this, and the ruler is hiding behind the power that has been given to him. If anything, the ruler represents an abuse of power and how dangerous this abuse can be to others. The twigs can be seen to symbolize the mother's selflessness. Unlike the ruler, who is acting selfishly, she is prepared to die in order for her son to not get in trouble. The end of the story is interesting as the ruler appears to have a change of heart when he hears the farmer talking about how he made the rope of ashes. For the first and only time in the story, the ruler admits to others that he has been in the wrong. That he, in reality, is dependent on the wisdom of the elderly. It is after all through the mother that the farmer learned how to make the rope of ashes. It is her wisdom that has saved the day, something that the ruler understands and more importantly accepts. The rope of ashes is significant as it acts as the impetus for change, and ironically, it is made by a woman who was due to be put to death, her only crime being that she had aged. It is also by forgiving the farmer that the reader realizes that the ruler himself has not only changed, but is willing to pay tribute to those who may have been old. Japanese literature mostly leans on sacrifice, compromise, and love. These themes are mostly prevalent and is embedded in their literary works. And that's about everything. Thank you everyone for your time. We will see you in the next one.